So, hola, everyone. Welcome. My name is Maria Hernandez Ojeda. I am Vice Chair of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives, and I teach Spanish at Hunter College. On behalf of ALBA, thank you, everyone, for attending this event. We're honored and excited to present today's program. You will learn about George and Ruth Watt from the love letters that they wrote to each other during the Spanish Civil War. This is the only exchange of love letters involving a Lincoln volunteer that we know of. Our guests of honor, Dan and Molly Watt, they are here, have joined us today to help us understand the relevance of these letters. Furthermore, we're delighted that actors Vero Maines and Nathan Payne will read select letters from George and Ruth's in a performance directed by ALBA board member Peter Glazer. It is an honor for me as an ALBA board member, as a Spaniard, and as a Hunter College faculty member to be here today. George Watt is a hero and a well-known figure among the Lincoln Brigade and historians of the Spanish Civil War. Ruth Watt's relevance, just like many women who resisted fascism, has not yet been fully appreciated. So there are many ways to teach history, to teach the Spanish Civil War and the experience of the Lincolns, but I cannot think of a more engaging way than bringing these letters to the classroom, talking to students about the individual experience of the war. So we are happy to announce that George and Ruth's letters have become part of the instructional materials at ALBA. Yes, where they will be used in teaching workshops. These and other teaching resources are available on our website and anyone can access them. Thanks to Dan and Molly Watt, ALBA has added an essential primary resource that will keep the Lincoln's history alive. So right now, Dennis Mini is posting the link to the full version of the script. Please keep in mind that today's performance is an abridged version of the full play. And also we wanted to mention something important for ALBA. This is the first live event at ALBA since the invasion of Ukraine began. The messages of justice, freedom, and love that you will hear in George and Ruth Watt's letters are sadly relevant once again as the world witnesses the human suffering in Ukraine. Our thoughts are with the Ukrainian people. In no uncertain terms, we stand with the Ukraine. So also please note that we will record today's event for future viewing. So if you don't want to be recorded, please turn off your camera. Events like this are made possible only by your generous contributions. Please consider donating to ALBA at alba-val.org/donate. And we're posting this link right now in the chat. So now let's watch an introductory video about George and Ruth Watt and their experience during the Spanish Civil War. We take this opportunity to thank Amy Linton, our expert editor, who did a wonderful job as always. After the video, ALBA board member Peter Glazer is going to introduce the actors who will perform for us today. We hope that you enjoy it.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Peter Glazer, a longtime member of the ALBA Board of Governors, and I'm pleased to be able to welcome you to today's event. George and Ruth, Songs and Letters of the Spanish Civil War is a love story, a war story, a personal public history, and a retelling in dramatic form of a crucial time in the ongoing struggle for justice and human dignity. If it's true that the personal is always political, this story shows that the political can also be quite personal. George and Ruth Watt were a newly married couple in 1937, just 23 and 22 years old, when they jointly made the decision that George would join the fight to stop fascism in Spain, and Ruth would remain in New York to organize support for the cause of the Spanish Republic locally, and especially for the Americans risking their lives in Spain. George and Ruth met as student activists, helping to found the American Student Union, the ASU, a nationwide campus coalition of anti-war, anti-fascist student organizations. George resigned from leadership of the ASU to join the Lincoln Battalion. The International Brigades drew 35,000 volunteers from 52 countries, including 2,800 Americans, to support the Spanish Republic's poorly equipped citizen army in their struggle against General Francisco Franco's experienced forces seeking to overthrow the elected government of Spain and impose a fascist dictatorship. Franco's troops were supplied with up-to-date weapons, tanks, and planes by Hitler and Mussolini as the start of an attempt to bring all of Europe under fascist sway. The International Brigaders believed that if they prevailed against fascism in Spain, they could possibly prevent a Second World War. At 23, George was a raw recruit with no prior military training. He learned to be a soldier, to fire a gun. He was wounded in battle, recovered in a hospital, and was selected to be trained as an officer. Although war was raging, most of George's letters home described day-to-day life in training and between battles, and the camaraderie among the American and Spanish soldiers, written with a lightness and optimism that belied the danger he was facing. Although he doesn't report the progress of the war, he frankly describes some of the horrors that he observed. He writes about being wounded in his very first action, and about a time when the Lincoln Battalion was cut off and surrounded by fascist forces. George and some of his comrades fought their way through and escaped by swimming across the fast-flowing, icy Ebro River to rejoin the rest of the battalion. There, they were met by Ernest Hemingway, then a journalist reporting on the war for American newspapers. One of George's proudest moments came when the Lincoln Battalion received an ambulance, paid for with funds raised by students of the American Student Union. Another came when he was appointed political commissar of the Lincoln Battalion, becoming one of the highest-ranking American officers in Spain. Ruth, who was an outspoken anti-fascist peace activist and campus leader during her years at Hunter College, held a day job to make ends meet, but her heart was with George in Spain and with her anti-fascist organizing. Her letters about daily life, political meetings, friends, and the movies she saw helped George keep his mind focused at home. She writes about organizing a boycott of Japanese silk and a citywide anti-fascist student demonstration in support of the Spanish Republic. She writes about her longing for George, imagining them together in romantic settings. Both she and George use humor at times, private jokes, and a bantering tone to cover up their loneliness and fear. Just a few months after George left Spain to return home in December 1938, the capital, Madrid, the last bastion of the Spanish Republic, fell to Franco's forces, unleashing a reign of terror and a fascist dictatorship that lasted more than 30 years. George and Ruth's son Dan was born in March 1940. Tragically, Ruth fell sick and died of unknown causes just 5 weeks later. George remarried Ruth's friend and fellow activist at Hunter College, Margie Wexler. In 1944, Dan's brother Steve was born. Dan grew up believing that Margie was his birth mother. At age 8, he was told about Ruth, but knew little about her. George fought against fascism again with the U.S. Army Air Corps in World War II. Following the war, he spent many years as a political organizer and later became a social worker and administrator. He died at age 80 in 1994, after which Dan and his wife Molly found a closed box that George had saved all his life. The box contained the letters of George and Ruth Watt. Dan came to know his birth mother, Ruth, for the first time. Dan and Molly wrote this play, drawing on the letters, to bring the history of the Spanish Civil War to life in a very personal way for the 21st century, showing the personal lives of the men who volunteered and the women who lived through it with them. We hope you enjoy our presentation. Hello, everyone, and this is now Peter Glaser live and in person. It's wonderful to see you all, and I wanted to thank again Amy Linton for her work on that introduction. In addition to my position on the ALBA board, I am a professor in the Department of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies at UC Berkeley, where I've had the privilege of working with these two wonderful actors that you are about to meet. They will be performing an excerpt from the play, The Spanish Civil War Letters of George and Ruth Watt, which in its full form also includes some of the amazing songs so popular in Spain and the US during the war. Nathan Payne is an actor with experience on both screen and stage. He is currently finishing his collegiate studies at the University of California, Berkeley, and will be graduating with a degree in theater and performance studies. The upcoming independent film Microwave is Nathan's feature film debut, shot in the wonderful East Bay area in San Francisco area, where he recently made his debut on UC Berkeley's TDBS stage in Carol Churchill's Love and Information. You can catch Nathan starring in Liminal Features' new horror film, The Walk, as well as assistant directing TDBS's main stage production of Men on Boats this April. Veronica Vero Menez is a queer, bigender Mexican-American actor and teaching artist based in Chicago. An alumni of UC Berkeley's undergraduate theater, dance, and performance studies department, Vero is thrilled to be working on this reading. As an actor, Veto's has worked with companies across the country. Veto holds an MFA in acting from DePaul University. She has additional training from the American Conservatory Theater here in San Francisco, has 250 hours of yoga teacher training certification, is a teaching artist with the Writers Theater, and an artistic associate at the Prop Theater, both in Chicago. We welcome them both, and I'm happy to introduce now this excerpt from The Spanish Civil War Letters of George and Ruth Watt.
Dear Ruth, well, I'm here in Spain and I feel great. As soon as I came into training camp, I was met by so many familiar faces among the other volunteers. My third day and I feel like a veteran. I'm learning very fast. I shot a rifle for the first time in my life and made an excellent score. I've just received my helmet and my ammunition belt, and you should see me. The uniforms we wear in the Lincoln Battalion make me look just like an American doughboy in the World War. Sometimes I get the feeling that we are a bunch of Boy Scouts playing war. It's hard to imagine myself as a soldier.
Dear George, I am terrifically busy nowadays. Imagine me, a working girl on my own in New York. Sometimes it seems to me that I work an 8-day week, 25 hours a day. Even the movies I go to are part of the routine. I saw Paul Muni starring in The Life of Emile Zola. It was really splendid. Of course, the Dreyfus Affair protest was sort of watered down for the screen. Nevertheless, the impact of Zola's political awakening was terrific. I saw it at the Get Your Ticket in Advance theater. Everyone was dressed up to kill, except for poor me. I was dressed as though I was going on a hike in an orange woolen dress, a brown corduroy jacket, and a brown beret. The lobby of the theater, of course, was a series of balconies overlooking the main hall. I swear, as I looked down from the highest balcony at all the swanky ladies and their escorts milling around below me, I felt like making one of my famous speeches from the balustrade. I had a ton of fun imagining the expressions if I had. I'm sure only the vision of your commonsensical restraining hand kept me from it.
Dear Machachkala, at long last I got your letter. I had lamb stew, French fried potatoes, and your letter for my main dish. I had grapes, lemonade, and your letter for dessert. Well, there's hardly any need to say what difference your letter made. It's much easier now facing artillery and machine guns than it was before. I was really worried that I wouldn't hear from you before we went into action. Well, I'm happy. That's all. Very, very happy. You write about my new vitality and depth of experience. Well, my new vitality consists of infiltration by running and flopping towards the enemy, usually done on very thorny, rocky ground. And my depth of experience comes from digging foxholes. So yesterday, our entire section was transferred into a Spanish company. This was done to strengthen the Spanish crew. This is just the chance that most of us have been waiting for. Now we're doing the job the International Brigades were really meant to do, and that is to teach. We in the Lincoln Battalion cannot win the war for the Spanish people. They are the ones to do that. But now I've got to learn Spanish, and I am learning it over a machine gun, over a rifle, and at night to the music of the guitar and the dance of the flamenco. Today, we spent all morning teaching our Spanish comrades all about the machine gun, about the rifle.
Yesterday, I lay awake trying to trace my understanding of war. As a young child, it was something dreadful that my parents used to talk about. I had nightmares about people who were called Huns, who would come into people's houses and sharpen their axes in front of our eyes. They would cut off everybody's heads, including my sister's. It's true, they never got me. I think the reason they spared me was in all my nightmares, I was beautiful. I was honestly sincere in my fervent denunciation of war, even emotional, but still sort of abstract. Well, war isn't so abstract today. It presses down on us.
We are now in reserve position, near but not at the front. The fellows are busy cleaning new rifles we were just issued. I wasn't issued a rifle. Instead, I have the special honor of being a machine gunner for our section. And boy, how I love that gun. I got it last night, took it apart and put it together a dozen times. This morning I couldn't sleep and I got up at dawn to look at the gun again. It's too heavy for one man, so another man and I operate it. It is the pride of our section. It's a light machine gun and has the firepower of 60 riflemen. So you see, I'm pretty important. At present, we are deciding on a name for the gun. But whatever it's called, I shall secretly name it after you, baby Ruth. And you'd be surprised, it has many similarities to you. It's beautiful, a little awkward in spots, a little heavy, and oh, how I love to strip it. I treat it with such a tenderness, and I actually sleep with it under my blanket. It's got to be protected. I mean, the gun means the life of those boys. Baby Ruth shoots from the shoulder and isn't going to miss.
Give my regards to your machine gun. I wish I were a machine gun and I could be with you in Spain. I swear I'd never jam or be awkward, even in spots. I'd keep myself spotlessly cleaned and oiled. Honestly, I'd be no trouble at all. And if we got in a really tough spot, I'd just start singing. That would scare the enemy. All right. Maybe sometimes after the day's work was over, I'd sidle up to you like those French women you wrote about and say, "Voulez-vous un joiement, cette nuit?"
It was yesterday that I first realized the actuality of the war. An order came through for a label detail, and 8 of us marched 2 kilometers in pouring rain through 6 inches of mud and water to the next town. Then we were told we were going to Belchite. The truck drove us over the mountain ridges and flat tableland. It was an open truck, so the rain lashed us in face and feet. We passed our former frontline trenches. They are narrow, zigzag, and deep with sandbags piled on the parapets and half flooded with water, foreshadowing what we'll have to face in the trenches this season. On both sides of the road is stretched barbed wire and heavy steel spikes at an angle and inclined towards us. The spikes are arranged in groups of 4 and are used to stop tanks. In the open spaces between spikes are explosive mines. But Belchite itself, what a sight. The most miserable, depraving, horrible and horrifying, stinking and reeking, etc., sight I'd ever seen. War pictures cannot tell the story. Ever. It was my first taste and smell of war. Of course, not direct. I merely witnessed the results in one little community. And it made me hate all the more the bastards who forced this destruction upon human beings.
Yesterday, our friend Dave Engels came home from Spain. When I went to the office and saw him standing in the doorway, I was speechless. All I could do was wring his hand. Dave talked into the small hours of the morning. Then I found 2 letters from you. Your letters, Dave's remarks, both very blunt, very matter of fact, very human. How can I tell you what I felt, what I learned? Darling, I see Spain and you. I know it's not accurate. It's not complete. I guess I should say I feel Spain and you. Dave told us of Jarama, Brunetti, Quinto, Belchite, showing us the details by moving around knives and plates and sandwiches on a table. He described the times Americans were caught in a barn, the time a group was forced to stay in a trench near the church for a full day in the hot sun without food or water, the taking of the church, the taking of the last stronghold, the last big house. What's it like to go over the top? I asked. Well, he said, the first and the last 5 minutes are the hardest. The first 5, you think it would be a shame if they got you before you could do anything. Then you just go ahead and do what you're told. And then at the end, you can't help thinking, It would be a shame if they got you after all you've gone through. You get pretty used to death, he said. But you can't help feeling badly about the comrades who died before they got a chance to show what they could do.
Darling, I've been trying to write desperately for the past 2 days. The whole thing's too close, too real to represent in words. The first day we came into the lines, we attacked, and the Lincolns made history that day. I'm writing this letter from a military hospital in Rue. But don't worry, darling, I'm not hit seriously. It's only a flesh wound and will heal in a couple of days. I got it while giving first aid to a pal of mine whom you don't know. He got it to the stomach and was suffering indescribable torture, lying right in the middle of the thickest fire. I rushed over, tore his clothes off, and started bandaging him when I felt this sharp sting through my left hand and right shoulder. No pain, just surprise. And I'm darn glad I had my wits about me, because I mustered all my strength and all his strength to get both of us behind this little slope where the bullets whizzed over our heads. And when I lay in the field, after having crawled from comrade to comrade, because my wound was not so serious and I was able to move about, giving all the first aid I could, I felt a strange elation at the way we all acted. I had taken the test of fire and passed, and I'm going back as quickly as possible. I want you to know how much I love you. How much I loved you out there under the fire when every sing and pang of a bullet and cannon told me how much I loved you. Out there in the field, I was so calm. I tried to sleep and thought of you and the movement, and you were one.
George, I was hurrying home very late last night along First Avenue. The street was pitch black and entirely deserted. I was more than a little frightened and tense. Suddenly I thought, gee, I wouldn't be a bit scared if I were walking with you. The strangest thing happened. Not only did I lose my silly fright, but suddenly the whole street came to life. Every store, every shop seemed to have a character of its own. Suddenly, I was delighted by the queer, almost unreal array of names on store windows. Greek next to Polish, next to Finnish, next to German, next to English, next to Jewish. I realized what a vast and thickly populated city New York is. When you're caught in a subway jam or crawl along 14th Street on a Saturday afternoon shopping rush, why, you just take the mob for granted. But when at night you see empty block after empty block of dingy streets with grocery stores, fruit, fish, meat markets, bakeries, all crowded together. When you reflect on how many thousands of times these blocks are replicated, why, then you feel all the millions of people of all ages and nationalities who, somewhere in the sleeping city, provide the basis for metropolitan life. Oh, do you know what, George? You are a great comfort to me.
Dear Ruth, I was interrupted in my writing by a strange procession which filed by me. It was the funeral of the German comrade who died yesterday. Everything was done to save him. Blood donors were called for, and I volunteered. The doctor took one look at my cheekbones and said no. But what a contribution of blood he must have gotten. Spanish, American, French. The comrade who was dead was an anti-fascist under Hitler. He came to Spain to continue his bitter struggle against the fascists who tortured him and his family. He was wounded here 3 times, each time going back into the lines. You know, we get hardened out here to the thought of death and suffering. Yet you can't help feeling that choking feeling that makes you want to cry and shout and curse. We don't cry here, but I had difficulty keeping my eyes dry. As the funeral passed each villa, every comrade who could possibly walk fell into line. Men on crutches, using canes, arms in slings, heads bandaged. And as I marched along, I couldn't help but think of my comrades who had been killed beside me that day. We couldn't give them a funeral, and this became their funeral. At the cemetery, 3 languages were spoken: French, Spanish, German. And I understood all 3. I felt such a spirit of internationalism as I never felt before. A volley of 3 shots by the assault guards. Then we sang the Internationale in Italian, French, German, Spanish, English, and Czech.
Now, even the miraculous weather can't keep my mind from planning the meetings for the coming week. And what a week it's going to be. Brooklyn College, NYU, City Main, and City 23rd will all have 1-hour student strikes at 11 a.m. Hunter and Columbia will have noon-hour demonstrations. All the evening schools will have torchlight parades to celebrate their stoppages. These demonstrations are being held by the American Student Union, with endorsements by most of the student councils, and the school newspapers promise special editions. These strikes and demonstrations align around 5 main points. The US must, 1, participate in a world conference of peace-loving nations. 2, lift the embargo on loyalist Spain. 3, withdraw Hitler's troops from Austria. 4, halt murderous attacks on Catholics and Jews. And 5, boycott Japanese goods. Someone has even arranged an airplane to fly over the demonstrations with a 60-foot streamer. Stop Hitler and save peace.
Dear Ruth, please tell everyone to stop writing letters to the boys here to come home, as if we had some prison sentence and our time was up. People back home need to appreciate the seriousness of the situation here. There can be no going home for anyone here until victory of Spain is guaranteed. Right now, we can't think of home. We've got enough to think about the homes in Spain being destroyed by the fascists. The homes in the States they're still pretty safe from the bombardments. This should be me instead of this letter. But just as the rest of the boys were going home, I got the grip and was sent to the hospital. I'm perfectly well now. I walk around the hospital and town and feel all my strength coming back. But the doctors say I'm still not strong enough to make the mad dash through France and withstand a rigorous winter ocean voyage. So wait another week, which is what I have to do. You have no idea how the minutes and hours weigh upon me. I've been away from home and you for 1.5 years now. There aren't many veterans who've been away that long. But if I can't make it home for Christmas and New Year's, which it's certain I can't, I'll surely make it home in time for our 2nd wedding anniversary. Then that's something. Then we'll celebrate. I love you so much. So hurry up and wait for me.
I saw the film Blockade yesterday. I don't know if you've heard of it yet. It's really a remarkable thing to come out of Hollywood. It's supposed to be a nonpartisan indictment of the bombardment of civilians, of the destruction of peaceful homes. In the course of telling the story of a peasant boy, the film shows why people continue to resist and what the land and liberty mean to them. There is a powerful humanitarian appeal in the picture of how innocent inhabitants of a town suffer under an unfair blockade but continue to resist. Some of the implications for the world as a whole are brought out by a sympathetic foreign newspaperman, but the part that hit home the most, as it is meant to, were the closing lines. In somewhat of the approved Hollywood fashion, the hero saves the food ship and exposes the traitors. The military commandant thanks him and promises him and his girl a leave as soon as possible, saying, "Maybe you can find a little peace and happiness." "Peace," replies the boy. "How can there be peace for anyone while our land and people are being destroyed by murderers?" Then he turns directly to the audience as the curtains closed, and through clenched teeth says, "The world can stop it. Where is the conscience of the world?" Love, Ruth.
Love, George.
My goodness, thank you. I think we're all moved. At least I'm moved. Thank you so much, Vero Maines and Nathan Payne. What an incredible performance. What a moving performance. Thank you so much. And we begin now the Q&A section. And there will be questions for you as well, of course. So, but I would like to begin by asking Dan Watt a question. Dan, what were your thoughts when you watched these two amazing young actors become your parents?
Hard to hard to describe how moving it is to hear Vero and Nathan speaking and acting and living the words that my parents wrote to each other before I was born, 85 years ago. And one of the things that makes it so moving, but also terribly sad, is how relevant they are today. It's what a world.
That's
Very
yeah.
moving. Thank you so much to Peter and the actors.
And can you tell us something about your family, your experience, any anecdotes with your dad?
So, my father, when I was a little boy, he also fought in World War II. And when he came home, I was 5 years old, and he would put me to bed at night. And he would tell me stories about his experiences and sing songs. My father played the mandolin and loved to sing the songs of the Spanish Civil War. And he would put me to bed with his mandolin, and he'd be playing Los Cuatro Generales, Los Cuatro Generales. And I would fall asleep to the sound of that beautiful tune. So that was really just my growing up. He would told me the story. He told me how he got wounded in Spain. He told me that he showed me the mark on his chest. He put my hand right on it so I could feel the scar. And then he showed me the where it went through his arm, the scars of that without hitting anything. And he used to say, if I had been bending 1 inch lower, we wouldn't be here. Neither of us would be here. I didn't really understand what that meant when I was 5 and 6 years old, but boy, is that powerful for me now. He told me other stories from the Spanish Civil War. He told me about how he and some other men had to escape after being surrounded by the fascist army, and how they fought and ran and fought and ran and finally reached the Ebro River and had to swim across it naked. And how when they got to the other side, there were 2 journalists, Herbie Matthews from the New York Times and Ernest Hemingway, who was then a reporter covering the war in Spain. And it made the front page of the New York Times. That was always a touchstone. George Watt swim the Ebro River on the front page of the New York Times. And those were just some of the things. Now, there was something missing in my father's stories. And what was missing was he never mentioned my mother, Ruth. She died 5 weeks after I was born. I did not know anything about her. I had my wonderful, wonderful stepmother, Margie, who brought me up and was my mother all my life, and who couldn't have been a better, more wonderful mother. But he never talked about Ruth. And even when I learned a few years later that I had a mother who died right after I was born, they didn't speak of Ruth in our family when I was growing up, or even when I was an adult. It was very rare to hear her name or to hear anything about her. So really, I did not know her until these letters.
Wow. It's incredible. So powerful. And thank you so much for sharing this with us, with all of us. And I know too that Molly, that I know that you played a very important role in bringing these letters to life. So how did this project came to be? What can you tell us about the process of uncovering George and Ruth Watt's letters?
Please know I'm still crying.
I know.
I'm so moved by the performance we have just witnessed, and so appreciative of the opportunity to have Alba be the home for this play script and these letters now. But I will tell you a little bit about how it happened. You know that George Watt was a hero in the Abraham Lincoln Brigade in the Spanish Civil War. And Dan Watt was his son. Dan Watt was not an academic of that subject, nor was he an expert, although he read many books about the Spanish Civil War and knew many of the people who fought in it. But he did not consider himself an expert, but he was often asked to speak at conferences or give a talk about it. And he said, "No, thank you. That's my father. Talk to my father about it." You know, we have our partitions in families sometimes. But his father had died, and there was a big brouhaha about the Spanish Civil War, which is a whole nother story, in New Hampshire in 2002. And people in New Hampshire decided the citizens of New Hampshire didn't really know what the Spanish Civil War was about and the idealism in it. And so they put on a conference at the State Library in Concord, New Hampshire, and asked Dan Watt to speak. And Dan Watt was about to phone back and say, "No, thank you," when I stayed that arm with the, he showed the bullet going through his father with, and said, "No, this is an opportunity for education right now, and I think we should participate." You know, at academic conferences how important primary resources are. Well, we have some of your father's letters. Let's rummage through the attic and see what we can find. And so we did. And we rummaged and we came up with a box that said Spain in big handwritten pencil and Ruth in little tiny letters. And we opened it up and took out all the posters and all the paraphernalia and all the odd pencils and erasers and whatnot. And on the bottom were 134 pages of carbon copies of Ruth's letters during a 6-month period to George. What was important about these letters is that there were carbon copies. We didn't have any idea they existed. I think George had forgotten. He had, you know, Ruth was compartmentalized. He now had a life with Margie and Danny and Steve. And so Ruth was able to do these because she had a job. After she was expelled from Hunter, she had a job with the WPA. And for 6 months, she had a lunch hour and access to a typewriter. These are very important. Everyone didn't have a typewriter in those days or a lunch hour. And she wrote to George on her lunch hours. And so that was a very important thing. Even though it was a WPA project about a geological project, that was not the important thing for us in this context. So this, we sat down immediately at a table with our friend who is here, and I hope we'll give him a spotlight if you can find him, because he was the third partner in doing this. Tony Salatan, the very marvelous folklorist and singer of folk songs, who did one, I think, the first public TV program using folk songs ever in the world, sat down with us, and I read all of Ruth's letters. Dan read all of George's letters, and we did 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. I said, I want to use this paragraph. I want to use some of this story. Tony said, I want to put this song in here. This goes with that. Dan said, George responds in this way. It may have been a year later he responded to the ideas she was saying. You know, that's what it took to compile this. There's only 6 months of Ruth, and there are very sporadic things of George. And Tony tied the thing together with music, which you don't hear here. But we did it that way, 3 characters, and we put it on at that conference as the last session. Everyone in the conference came to the last session. And I will say they applauded for George and Ruth with a standing ovation. And we did about 36 performances for many organizations after that. And then Tony retired to the West Coast, and we sort of retired it. And now we are absolutely thrilled to pass this on so that Ruth's voice lives on. I wonder, can you find Tony Salatin or Jill Rosenthal?
yeah.
There. Oh, there's Tony. Okay.
That's Jill.
Jill. Okay, Jill, will you give it to Tony for us?
Tony is in memory care. He has Alzheimer's disease. He is not here at the house with me right now. And that's why I asked about the recording, because I'd like to play this for him.
Yes.
But it was a remarkable experience
Thank
for
you.
him to do this with you. As you know, Tony was always extremely political, especially associating music with politics from the time he was a teenager in the 1940s. And he also was very interested in ferreting out history. And so this particular project, as well as the opportunity to work on it with people who were some of his oldest friends, was probably a big highlight of his career.
Thank you so much, Jill. We love
So I'm
you.
sorry I didn't know whether there was going to be music today. I didn't know what it was going to involve. And so I wasn't able to go and get him and bring him home to watch it, but I will make sure that he sees it.
Good.
Great.
Give him our love. He was a friend of mine from the time I was 19, and his father was a booster of the Spanish Civil War. He was a dentist, and he took care of the guys before they went to Spain, their teeth when they came home. And so this was very dear to our heart. It was a very important moment in our lives when Dan, Tony, and I did this project, and Jill was there feeding us bowls of food all the way through.
I don't know how many performances of this I saw. It was interesting to me today to hear some different letters. Some of it was what I remembered, and some of it was material I hadn't heard before. So I'll be interested to read the entire version that you've posted.
Thank you.
So thank you, Jill. And of course, you'll give our love to Tony. And there will be a recording which you can listen to. So I just wanted to say something that was special about Ruth's letters was that we learned something about what she was doing in political organizing. You heard one big example of that, a huge demonstration that she helped organize of all the colleges in New York, in the New York area, to participate in. And when we started this, thinking about this project, we spoke to Maria, who was our host today. And Maria teaches at Hunter College, and said that she had been looking into and investigating, researching the work that the anti-fascist women in Hunter College did in the 1930s. And I wonder, Maria, if you could say something about what you found out about, you said you knew both my mothers.
Yeah. And both your mothers, they were, I mean, you have an incredible lineage, your two mothers and your father. So very briefly, back in the 1930s, as you know, Hunter was a college for women. I have identified almost 200 students or recent graduates from Hunter who were active participants in protests related to the urgent political causes of the 30s. A large number of these women were committed to fighting fascism in Spain and the rest of the world, of course. They did mass demonstrations, walkouts, fan collations, and Ruth Rosenthal stood out among them. For example, in December 1933, Ruth was the only demonstrator arrested during the German ambassador's visit to Columbia University. The newspapers mentioned, 1,000, 2,000, there were a lot of people, many anti-Nazi demonstrators, and Ruth was arrested for distributing leaflets, and her arrest caused an outbreak among the demonstrators until the case against her, it was for disorderly conduct, it was dismissed in night court. So she was a fierce activist. And at Hunter, Ruth was placed under probation for her anti-fascist activities. So, we know about George and we know about his bravery in fighting fascism in Spain. We still have much to learn about Ruth's prominent anti-fascist role here in the US. But there is no doubt that she was a leader. And I take this opportunity now to open the Q&A, because we could be all day talking about this. This is so fascinating. We can have an all-day event. Amy Linton is here and she has a question. Amy, it is for Dan. Amy, would you like to ask?
I was just wondering from Dan, what your feelings were when you learned about your birth mother.
Amy, thank you for the question. That was a long story.
Don't tell it all.
And I won't really try to tell it, but I also want to thank you for the video, for making that video. Was beautifully done. I could not believe how wonderful it was.
Thank you.
Well, I was 8 years old. I was very, very upset.
Mm-hmm.
I was angry that I didn't know. I was angry that I did know. I mean, what can an 8-year-old do learning that information? So I guess that's the thing. And very interesting psychologically, I blotted it out of my mind for about another 5 years. And when I was a teenager, I forgot that I had another mother. When I was a teenager, I started remembering and started thinking about what it must have been like. I looked for pictures or whatever, but that was quite a story in my life. So thank you for asking.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Amy. And we have a question from Linda J. Would you like to ask the question, Linda J? It's for Dan, I believe. Are you there?
Okay, I'm gonna have to read it because I wrote it and and now I have to go back up and find it.
I have it if you want.
Yeah, well, basically I was wondering, because my mother was in Friends of the Lincoln Brigade and she spoke to me about when they arrived back in New York and their reception and everything. And I was wondering if George told you anything, Dan, about what the reception was like when he got back to the States after fighting in Spain, and then later on, if he had any problems, like for having fought in Spain, any problems with either work or with the House Un-American Activities Committee or anything like that, because my mother knew people who did.
Another long story, Linda. I'm going to make a little plug here, Amy's question and Linda's question. I wrote a memoir a few years ago called History Lessons, in which I described my relationship with my father and a lot of the experiences that our family went through during the Red Scare, the years of the Red Scare. Yes, my father was a communist. He continued to be a communist, and he was arrested, put on trial, federal court, and eventually, in a long story, these cases were all thrown out by the Supreme Court years later. But it was a very difficult time for our family and for many, many families of people who, those who fought in Spain and a lot of people who hadn't fought in Spain. It's a difficult time.
Excellent.
Did he say anything about how he was received by the people when he actually arrived back in the States? His people. I don't mean.
Well, I remember I heard about that from my stepmother, Margie, and she told about meeting George at the ship. Now, George was married to Ruth, Margie's very close friend. They were there together, I'm sure. But she told how excited everybody was when George and the other volunteers came back and how they applauded them and cheered them. He was invited to give talks in different places, but so I'll just leave it at that. Yes, it was a very strong reception for George and the other volunteers from their supporters at home.
Thank you, Dan. I'd like to ask Vero and Nathan a question, our actors today. You have learned about the Spanish Civil War. You have performed at Heart of Spain. Did this performance add to your knowledge of the historical period, to your understanding of the experience in the Spanish Civil War? What do you think, Vero?
Yeah. So my relationship with Spain started before any of my knowledge actually of the Spanish Civil War, and I went and studied abroad there for 3 months and learned about it through text, like through historical text. And then I had the great honor of working with Peter Glaser on his piece Heart of Spain. But this has been the most like concrete, like literal talking of the text, like first person, right, accounts and stuff. So getting to know the whole experience through first person text is really a different experience. It's helping me understand Ukraine and this moment a lot more. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Vero. And Nathan, would you like to add something?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'll second like all of that. I wasn't able to be in Heart of Spain because I'm a baby compared to Vero and such. But no, when Peter reached out to me with this great opportunity to do this, he provided a lot of material for me to educate myself on the Spanish Civil War, because it was something I'm afraid I wasn't super knowledgeable about. But there was just so much to learn just about like the relevance and the importance that it had in the world at that time. But like as Dan said before, how much relevance it has now, and I think it spoke to me as a young person right now, thinking about my place in the international conflicts that are happening right now and such. So, and just being able, like Vero said, to speak through the script just helped me emotionally kind of work through some of those things. But yeah, it was like definitely a very like immersive first dive into kind of this history and into these stories and stuff. I just want to thank Dan and Molly again for being so willing to share that part of your hearts with us. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Nathan and Vero. And believe it or not, we're near the end. Don't go. We still have some things going on, but time is flying, and we would like to speak to you about the George Watt Award. And we have with us Alba's treasurer, Aaron Retish, and he's going to talk to us about this award. Aaron, welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this wonderful presentation. So I'm coming to you as the chair of the George Watt Essay Prize Committee. The George Watt Essay Prize honors the legacy of Lincoln Brigade vet George Watt, a writer, activist, and founding member of ALBA. The Essay Prize, established by George's relatives, friends, and comrades after his death, recognizes students for their work on any aspect of the Spanish Civil War and the global fight against fascism, or the histories and contributions of the international volunteers who fought to support the Spanish Republic. It is the only essay prize that I know of that recognizes student work on the Lincoln Brigade and the Spanish Civil War. The prize is judged by some of the leading scholars and the most knowledgeable people on the international volunteers and anti-fascism, and has been awarded annually since 1996 to over 60 students from 19 states and 7 countries from across the world, a number that is growing every year. In fact, we recently had our first repeat winner, a student who won at the undergraduate level and then went to graduate school and received the award again for a chapter of his dissertation. The award had fueled his interest as a university student and shaped his decision to study the Spanish Civil War further. What started as an annual recognition of undergraduate and graduate student essays has now expanded in collaboration with ALBA's very successful teaching institutes. It now includes essays, stories, and poems from pre-collegiate students, that is, students from kindergarten to 12th grade. Students' work has ranged from analyses of music of the Spanish Civil War to studies of medical brigades of the international battalions and the Frankist forces, explorations of gender and race in the international brigades, the coverage of the Spanish Civil War in American and Mexican news, Soviet show trials in Spain, studies of refugees, as well as moving poetry and stories. The George Watt Essay Prize is one of ALBA's most widely known initiatives and one that has reshaped students' lives. Recipients' work appears in The Volunteer, our magazine, and students' research has pushed our understanding of the Spanish Civil War and the international volunteers further, not only just in The Volunteer, but from their further work in published articles and books. The long and inspiring group of winners has gone on to become educators, filmmakers, doctors, lawyers, and in fact, our current chair of ALBA, some of whom have placed social activism and social justice in the center of their lives. The George Watt Essay Prize is a pillar of ALBA, for it supports the continuing legacy of the Spanish Civil War by our students, and it ensures that the lessons of the 1930s and the legacy of George Watt continue today and into the future. We want to thank the Watt family for their continued support and students who have submitted their work over the years. It's truly been inspiring. If you want to support the legacy of George Watt and promote the scholarship of the Lincoln Brigade in the Spanish Civil War and anti-fascism done by wonderful students from across the world, I ask you to please consider donating to support the George Watt Essay Prize. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much for that information and for helping us close the event. We want to thank everyone for joining us here today. We are very grateful to Dan and Molly Watt, to Vero Maines and Nathan Payne for making this event possible. All of us at ALBA hope to see you soon. And all of us at ALBA also mark your calendars. Hope to see you in our annual gala on Saturday, April 30th at 4 p.m. I don't want to say goodbye. I would love to talk for more, but we gotta go. And this program will be available in YouTube very, very soon. Hasta pronto y salud.